Welcome to Full Melt Extractions. I'm David, and if you're a solventless extractor or you want to learn to become one, I'm here to help you gain the knowledge you need to elevate your craft to the next level. One word you're going to hear me say a lot if you watch my videos is sorting. It is in no way exaggerating to say that every aspect of being a single-source solventless extract producer relates to sorting. And our topic today, genetics and selection, is no exception. Stay tuned to the end of the video where I'll share a list of some of the top-of-the-line genetics I've already run myself, as well as what's working for others, and some of the most up-and-coming gear that I'm excited about on the cutting edge of solventless extraction. When it comes to making quality solventless extracts, first and foremost, it all comes down to quality genetics. But what constitutes quality genetics from a hash standpoint? I'd argue it's all about the trichomes, baby. Now, there are a wide variety of opinions on a lot of things among hash makers, but I doubt I'd be able to find one that disagreed with that statement. That's why you should select for trichome qualities and trichome quantity and not a whole lot else. And I would even go so far to argue, even if you aren't making hash and don't care about extraction, you should still primarily select for trichome qualities and quantity. Now, if you've been growing flowers for a while, this may seem counter to best practices. After all, your trichomes and their qualities and quantity are important, but it's only just one part of the puzzle. What about the color? What about the bud structure? What about the density? What about the yield? What about the flowering time? What about all these other factors? And I would counter with the question, all these things are nice, but when people judge your bud ultimately and in the end, will the final judgment be based on any of these things? I mean, in other words, if you have the best bud structure, density, color, yield, etc., but your potency and flavor are not quite on point, is there anyone in the history of ever who will say that was some of the best quality herb they've ever tried? Again, I feel like most would agree with me that of course they likely wouldn't rate that particular bud very highly, but I'm sure most of us could relate to the experience of trying some bud that didn't blow us away in terms of bag appeal, but ended up knocking our socks off due to flavor and potency. There's a lot of bag appeal factors, stuff that can really push flower in particular to the next level when you can combine an amazing presentation with an amazing genetic in terms of flavor and potency, but bag appeal factors are never what makes or breaks a strain or cultivar. In the end, it all comes down to flavor and potency. And where does the flavor and potency in cannabis reside? Well, it resides in the cannabinoids and the terpenes produced by the plant. And for all practical purposes, where do all of those compounds reside? In those tiny little chemical factories called the glandular trichome heads. Now, you can make the argument, and technically you wouldn't be wrong, that not all of the terpenes and cannabinoids in the cannabis plant are found in the glandular trichome heads. But you'd only be right in the same sense and to the same extent as if you said, well, not all of the mass of the solar system is in the sun. Well, technically you're right. We're standing on an Earth that proves that there is mass in the solar system other than the sun. However, the sun still constitutes over 99.98% of the entire mass of the solar system. Similarly, the vast majority of cannabinoids and terpenes in your cannabis plant are contained in the glandular trichome heads. And since flavor and potency are the two single biggest factors that pretty much anyone judges cannabis by, that's why I would argue, even if you're not growing for hash, you should be growing for trichomes. So let's talk about trichome qualities. Why do I say qualities instead of quality? Well, if I said trichome quality, first off, it wouldn't necessarily be very clear what I meant. Do I mean the flavor, the potency, the melt, ease of separation and extraction processes? Qualities covers all that though. Trichome quantity is also important, but if the flavor, potency, or melt is lacking, or the heads are extremely difficult to isolate in a solventless extraction process, then all that quantity doesn't matter, at least if you're beginning with the end in mind of making your crops into high-quality solventless extracts. There's also good reasons from an extractor's perspective to select against traits that you would likely select for if you were growing for flower, such as extreme flower density, and to select for, or at least not select away from traits that you normally would select against, such as the tendency to foxtail. Flower density, most often, doesn't seem to have any bearing on whether or not a strain will perform well, and in some cases, I've found very dense flowers have a tendency to not release their trichomes very easily. Of the strains I've run that looked like they should do well, some of the ones that have performed the poorest have had particularly dense flower structure. Meanwhile, normally undesirable bud structure such as foxtailing, while it definitely takes away from bag appeal, doesn't seem to have a negative effect on ease of solventless extraction. Due to the tops of them being many protruding fingers rather than a single tight nodule, it may even aid in the ease of separation of your trichomes. Another thing a lot of flower producers don't even realize is a thing to select for is melt, or thin cuticles. You see, all trichomes are not created equal. They have differing levels of terpenes and cannabinoids, and their structures vary slightly from strain to strain, and among different cultivars or phenotypes of the same strain, even somewhat on different parts of the same plant. Trichome heads sit atop a multicellular structure called a capitate stalk. The cell that connects the stalk to the head is called the basal cell. It connects to the stipe cells underneath the secretory glands, which are the chemical factories that produce the terpenes and cannabinoids in your trichome head. And the protective outer layer that keeps those compounds inside the trichome head is called the cuticle. This cuticle and its relative thickness to the overall diameter of the trichome head is your biggest factor in determining melt. If it's thin, like the skin of a water balloon, then you're going to have a very melty hash if you can isolate those trichome heads. If it's more like a Tootsie Pop with a very thick membrane and a relatively small center of active ingredient, then no matter how efficient your extraction process and how well you isolate those heads, you're not going to have a very melty product. The final trait I will discuss here is something we've only been keying in on very recently in the hash making world. But many serious single-source solventless extractors are now conducting pheno hunts to search for cultivars with what is known as the weak neck trait, or trichomes that develop abscission zones upon maturity. We've begun to learn that, just like with certain fruits, when some trichomes become ripe, the connection between the basal cell and the stipe cells, where the trichome head is connected to the capitate stalk, grows more slender and produces what is known as an abscission zone, or specialized cell layer that separates plant parts at the organ junction in response to developmental or environmental signals. Strains that have large number of trichomes with this weak neck trait are what are commonly known as dumpers, meaning they easily produce large amounts of hash when subjected to water extraction. This is quickly becoming a main trait that is selected for in the solventless extraction world. You know, when you consider all this, it really makes you wonder how many amazing dumper strains were thrown out because of ridiculously arbitrary reasons, such as color or density or bud structure, because someone was growing for flower and didn't realize they had something extremely special on their hands. So it's time for that list of genetics. Quick disclaimer before I give you this list: just like every human being is a unique individual, so too does every seed grow into a unique plant. Unless you're running a clone of a known dumper, you have to treat each and every seed as an unknown quantity. Remember, we are sorting here, people. If you've grown a phenotype out and you know your growing and extraction technique is on point, but you're just not getting the results you want from that cultivar, just plant another seed, regardless of who told you that was a good hash strain, even if it was me. First, let's talk about some breeders whose gear I have personal experience running: DNA Genetics and Dinafem. Unfortunately, the Spanish government seems to have shut down Dinafem, but you can still get their seeds on some seed banks. Their cheese was the funkiest cheese cut I've personally ever experienced. It made absolutely ridiculous full melt and pretty good yields. Last time I checked, I was still able to find it at a couple seed banks. Their Critical Plus also made a lovely, tangy, orangey full melt. As for DNA Genetics, their Sour Kosher was a dumper for me and made third wash 5-star full melt in a range of 25 to 159 microns. You heard that right. That's a true full spectrum third wash full melt. I also washed their Kosher Tangy, which I highly recommend. It is now called 24 karat gold. My brother also had really good luck with their LA Confidential. Basically, you can't go wrong running DNA Genetics for hash, in my experience. The highest yielding hash cut I ever experienced at about 7% yield of full melt from fresh frozen was Super Silver Sour Diesel Haze from Connoisseur Genetics. They're still operating. I've spoken with the head breeder recently, and they seem a very hash-minded company that I recommend, although I've only run that one cut from them. I think they just did release it again, though. Just saying. I've recently run some Inhouse Genetics gear. I would definitely classify their meathead as a dumper. At least the cut I got a hold of was. Here in the next few months, I will also be running some sugarcane from them, as well as some atomic jelly, so look forward to that. Then, there are clone-only variants available that are known dumpers, like Gorilla Glue No. 4 and GMO, to name a couple. Acquiring clones of known dumpers eliminates guesswork and much of the sorting of selection out of the process. This has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantage is you're getting a known quantity that is known to perform well. The disadvantage is you're getting a known quantity. So you know you're getting something really nice, but you're not really discovering something new, which is a lot of the allure of going through the whole selection process, finding something amazing that no one else has ever found before. Nevertheless, it never hurts to add a couple known dumpers while you're trying to build your own stable. They can also give you a baseline reference point to know for sure if your grow process is on point, but we'll talk a little more about that in another episode. But when you talk about clone-only hash dumping strains, you have to mention the one and only Schwale, the mastermind at Farmhouse Studios Genetics. This guy is specifically breeding for the weak neck trait, and he goes so in-depth as to measure the average micron size of the heads on his strains. This guy is a serious hash breeder, and he does sell cuts for a pretty penny of his hash dumping phenotypes. He also sells seeds when he feels he can get them genetically stabilized to the point of having at least a few dumpers per pack. I plan to try his Banana Shack here in the near future if I can get my hands on a few seeds before they sell out, that is. Some other strains that I found were dumping for other hash makers while researching for this video are Miracle Alien Cookies, Rainbow Belts, Papaya, Grape Cream Cake, Apple Fritter, Tropicana Cookies, Straw Nana, and Super Boof. Pretty much all those are available somewhere in clone or seed form. I'm not going to list seed banks or provide links. This is just a jumping off point to give people a few strains and breeders to go to get them started. You want to find your next amazing hash phenotype? Just keep popping seeds. To other hash makers out there, let me know in the comments what strains you're excited about running, what's running well for you or has done well for you in the past. Are there any selection criteria you like to use that I missed? I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this topic. If you have one, let's hash it out in the comments section. So, thanks for watching. This has been David with Full Melt Extractions, reminding you to keep up that passion for the hashing. Happy hashing.